Hey guys, today I wanted to talk about probably the number one question that I get asked from people, and that's why do you still shoot film? I get asked this question so frequently, and I thought it'd be a great video to do early on in the series of evangelizing film photography and kind of my journey and things going on. I don't want to do an objective criticism or review of the differences between digital and film and why I might think film is better in some circumstances than digital. I really want to offer kind of a why and what it means to me and the reasons behind why I choose to shoot more film than I do digital. It really boils down to speed. I think the number one reason is film causes you to slow down and think about what you're doing. There is a slower process because of the loading of film and the unloading and the changing and the dark room and the developing and all that. But when I talk about speed of it, I'm not even accounting for that, or even metering for that matter, which in a lot of cases for film is a more critical process. But I'm really talking about the entire picture taking process. And with film, it seems to cause me to be a little bit more methodical about what I'm going to take, a picture of. With film, there's a limited number of frames that you have. If you're shooting 35 millimeter, you're probably shooting 24 or 36 exposures. If you're medium format, it might be 10 or 12 on a roll. And if you're shooting large format, 4x5 or 8x10 or similar, you're shooting a single sheet of film, in the camera. So compared to digital, where a memory card might hold hundreds of images, there's fewer images that you're going to be able to take sort of during this time while you're out shooting. And I think for me, it's more about taking a picture than it is about editing through 100 pictures that you took. So the ratio of pictures that you take is obviously better because you're thinking about it a little bit more. But the entire process is something that you're really aware of what you're doing, because film is not cheap. Film cameras, some deals you can get out there and get hand-me-downs and such, but a lot of good film cameras are as expensive as digital cameras are. And film itself is not cheap by any means. It's certainly not getting any cheaper. And the development process and the chemicals and all of that, it all adds up in the end. And so when you have a few number of pictures and a high cost associated with them, the stakes are higher. But I will say, that process that causes you to slow down, it really ups kind of the experience for you. And so while the stakes are higher, I think the reward is much higher as well. And I think that's really another reason that I like shooting film so much, is sort of that pride and ownership of the entire process. There really is nothing better than opening up a development tank after being in the dark room and kind of pulling a roll of film out and having a look at it, up against the light and kind of seeing what you got. It seems like it's a gamble, but it really is. You set out with a vision and you meant to capture it, and there's everything from waiting for the right light to the composition to your metering and which lens you may have chosen, all the way down to, especially for black and white, tons and hundreds, almost an infinite number of development configurations that you can do as far as which dilution and how long, and there's a whole darkroom kind of side to film photography as well. But all of that combined, I think you really start with a vision and end up with something that you tangibly can hold in your hand that you created, the negative. And I think there's really a sense of pride in creating that. And I think you think about the entire process of taking pictures, and you really have manufactured that image, from start to finish. And that's everything from, again, which developer you use and which lens, but it's even which film you choose. There's dozens of variety, everything from, high contrast and low grain and high grain and more modern emulsions and all of that. I think all of those kind of come into aligning into this vision that you have. And when you get a rock solid exposure and you can scan it and see it on the computer or print it in the darkroom. I mean, there's no better feeling. It's certainly nothing that I've experienced like that with digital, where it felt more like being in the right place at the right time. And what I mean by that is I see with my digital kind of process, I found a lot of times I'd go with the kind of spray and pray mentality where I'd set up and I knew roughly what my exposures were going to be, but inside the camera meter, it's kind of telling me roughly where I need to be. And then I might bracket, a dozen photos or so, just trying out different, exposures on the darker side to see what that looks like versus highlights. And I get back to the computer and load them all into Lightroom or whatnot. And you sort through them and you find the one picture that looks the best out of that. And you throw it into Photoshop and you go through your development process and add a dozen layers of this and that. And it really, digital to me felt more like digital art than it did photography. I mean, taking the picture was important, but it was really about being at the right place at the right time to capture the image. The magic all seemed to happen in Photoshop. And don't get me wrong. I mean, there's some fantastic photographers and photographs that I could only dream of taking. And my Photoshop skills are not all that great. But it just seemed like, people were wowed by more of the post-processing of those images than they were the actual raw image and what it took to create that. And I think my sort of sense of pride with those pictures kind of matched that. But I think that also then really is kind of one of the other reasons that I like film is the look. And yeah, there are filters out there that you can apply in post-processing to get a film look. There's manual things you can do. There's filters that you can buy from companies out there. But when you look at those compared to the actual look of a scanned image, the imperfections that come with that analog image, on a negative, there really is a difference, and you can see which one really is film. There's nothing like it. And as I mentioned before, there's so many different types of film. There's more varieties of black and white film now than ever. We're losing some of the slide films and things like that, and some of the color options, but there really still are a lot of options to choose, everything from a more modern fine-grained look to very contrasty Tri-X from Kodak. You really get to kind of find your flavor, and I think that really allows you to have your vision and use a film's character or personality to fit the vision or your style that you're trying to achieve. Whereas with digital, your image comes out digitalized the same way every time, and any application of that vision really needs to be done in post-processing, and it then becomes a little bit more of that digital art that I was mentioning before. I think it ties back into the idea that you really need to think a little bit more about the entire process. Again, it slows you down, but I think it really allows you to then really create something from scratch that is exactly kind of what you intended it to be. The other thing that film has done, and I've noticed this as I'm starting a new project this year called Through the Hasselblad, where I'm kind of filming live how I'm taking these pictures out on the street. People are just fascinated with these older film cameras, the Mamiya RZ or the RB67, the Hasselblad, the Pentax. People are just like, wow, that is so cool. Like, how old is that? Does that still shoot film? And there's always these stories that seem, I used to have a camera like that, or I shot 35 millimeter. And it's amazing how many people had jobs where they were doing journalism or reporting or worked for the newspaper or what have you. And it's interesting to hear these stories and how that's sort of died over the years. As film died, they never really transitioned over to digital. But I think the conversation, you never see that with digital when you go on the street and try to shoot. Even I tried with kind of a digital rangefinder, and rangefinders are probably one of the more popular types of cameras for street photography. I just never found that. People were just kind of like, okay, there's some guy on the street taking pictures, but you pull out a medium format camera, or even a really old kind of 35 millimeter SLR, people seem a little less intimidated or a little less nervous about having their picture taken, whether it's candid or the posed portrait. And for that reason, I love film, and, on the street and shooting that street photography it really kind of sparks the conversation. People are interested, they're engaged, and I've never had a problem approaching somebody and saying, hey, I have this 20-year-old camera, 30-year-old camera. Can I take your picture of some film? They're always kind of like, what? They still make film? So it's fun, and you get to meet people and have a good time, and it's it's different, and people just seem kind of to gravitate and are drawn in through that. But I think at the end of the day, the real reason why I shoot film is that it's unique and it's different, and it's not mainstream, and there's seems to be an interest from people, and I like sharing that interest and kind of keeping the passion for real photography and kind of the art of film, keeping that alive with people and sharing that. So, I find for my photography style and for the things that I'm doing, I can still produce some amazing pictures, especially with my large 4x5 large format camera. The quality, the sharpness, and the detail is just unreal. And it I don't miss my digital at all. I love that I can kind of slow down and just think about what I'm doing and go out and spend an hour or two and get one picture. I love that. It's relaxing. It's like I said, it's fun, and people seem to kind of like hearing stories about it as well. But I'm curious. These are kind of my thoughts, reasons on it. If you're watching this and you like shooting film, I'd love to know, one or two reasons why you still continue to shoot. I think it's important to share those, and somebody out there that might be taking a class in high school or college, or just has an old camera laying around and is thinking, it's going to be expensive and it's difficult. Maybe something that would just inspire them to pick that camera back up, grab even a cheap roll of drugstore, film for a couple bucks, and just shoot and remember what it was like when you had to really think about everything you had to do, and sort of the mystery and the excitement about not being able to see anything until you actually get it developed and either get it back from a lab, or if you're developing it yourself. But please share some of those ideas down in the comments. I'd love to hear them, and it's going to be fun, launching some videos and sharing kind of my story. And be sure to keep an eye out for the Through the Hasselblad series. I'm going to try to keep a regular rhythm of those going and get those updated. So as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.